between sweet but passionate kisses. As if we could not be separated, I could feel his hot breath mixed with the rapid beat of my chest. His hands began to move deftly, slowly, unbuttoning my shirt. With each touch, each button undone, the feeling of being naked came not only from the clothes, leaving my body, but also from the vulnerability that we were both revealing. That feeling made my heart clench. But at the same time, all the reservations gradually disappeared that night. We no longer held anything back, all barriers, all reservations were broken, as if the world was left with only the two of us. Every gesture, every touch, had a deeper meaning, as if wanting to engrave each other's image into our minds and bodies. We gave each other everything, not just physical intimacy, but also the fusion of emotions of secret, desires that had been suppressed for so long. That night, both of them understood that all boundaries had been erased, and there was nothing but each other's absolute presence in that moment. The next day, when my mother returned home, everything seemed to have returned to normal. My father and I acted normally, both smiling and chatting as if nothing unusual had happened the night before. My mother did not notice the change in the atmosphere. Everything went on as usual. We had breakfast together, talking about everyday things like a normal family. But inside it, knew that we both knew what had happened. Although we kept our natural appearance deep down, a heavy silence had fallen between my father and me. Every look, every gesture carried a different meaning, as if we were sharing a secret that no one else could know. Even though we knew it was wrong, we did not stop our meetings, became furtive, and hurried, increasing the conflict between guilt and desire. We knew it was wrong, but neither of us had any intention of stopping. Every touch, every look implied that we would continue without words, without promises. Then, one night, when Mother was fasting to sleep, my father quietly snuck into my room. Without me hearing a sound, I was still in a deep sleep, completely unaware that my father had been lying next to me, his arms around me. When I woke up, the strange warmth surrounding my body startled me. I turned my head slightly and realized his familiar face was close by. A moment of surprise passed, but then my lips curved into a gentle smile. And I gently hugged my father, in that moment. I forgot everything around me, leaving only my father and me gently. "Dad, be careful. Mom won't hear," I whispered, my voice trembling like the cold wind blowing through the crack in the door. Each word was difficult to say, as if I was trying to hold back something deep inside that was about to burst. My throat was tight, but my heart was beating strongly, erratically in my chest. My hands unconsciously tightened, the blanket trying to control the trembling that spread throughout my body. My breathing was now ragged, as if each breath was held back by an invisible anxiety. The room was strangely quiet, the slightest sound of stir or whisper, making my heart pound, afraid that this secret, our adventurous love, would be revealed to others, exposing everything we tried to hide. The fear of being discovered gradually became an obsession, but I couldn't say no. Every time Dad came, I realized I was stuck in this relationship, unable to stop even though I knew it would end badly. Then one day, the day I had tried to avoid, finally came that day. My mother called to say that something had come up. She couldn't come home as planned and would only return the next morning. A brief sense of relief passed through me and Dad when we thought that we wouldn't be interrupted that night. We didn't worry, thinking we still had time until the next morning. My mother suddenly came back. Earlier than expected, without warning. We, in our carelessness, did not realize that she had entered the room. Standing before that scene, she was silent, and I knew everything had fallen apart. The whole world seemed to collapse before her eyes, and in that moment, everything fell apart. I felt suffocated. Unable to speak, my father also stood still. Unable to find an excuse, the atmosphere in the house was filled with heaviness and tension, leaving no room for tolerance or sympathy after my mother witnessed the horrifying truth. She did not say a word. Just quietly left the house. The atmosphere in the house seemed to freeze everything between my father and I. Also became strange, full of pressure and indescribable embarrassment. We no longer knew what to say or do. After all the secrets had been exposed, the following days passed in heavy silence. My mother did not come home, and finally she filed for divorce. My parents decided to end the marriage that I once thought was unbreakable. The house was now empty and cold, leaving me to face the ruins of a once happy family. I was in a state of chaos, not knowing where to go between my father and mother. I did not know what to choose. My father, who had been my support, had now become the source of my breakdown. My mother, who had loved and cared for me since I was little, was now distant, hurt, and carrying an incurable pain in her heart. I realized that my wrong emotions and weakness had led to irreparable consequences. My whole family was broken because of choices that I never thought would lead to this outcome. The damage not only affected my mother, but also me and my father, causing us to lose love and trust in each other. Finally, I understood that all boundaries in family, real relationships, need to be respected. Once they are broken, there is no way back. Love, no matter how strong, cannot fix such serious mistakes. Now I am at a crossroads in my life, not knowing where I will go, who I will go, who I will go, who I will return to. I do not know if I can face my father or mother, and I do not know if they still have a place for me in their lives. The family I once had is now just a painful memory, and my path ahead is still very, very unclear. I only know that I have to find a way to face the consequences of what I've caused and learn to live with this pain forever. I know that after hearing this story, many people will criticize me, saying that I have done unforgivable things. But that's okay. I understand that everyone has their own point of view, and I am ready to accept all judgmental eyes. The most important thing is that I have dared to face my truth, accepted the pain and consequences of the mistakes I have caused. My final advice to you, who are listening to this story, is to always be alert and maintain boundaries in any relationship, especially in the family. Sometimes love and closeness can blind us, leading to bad decisions that we never thought we would make. Remember, every action has consequences, and there are mistakes that cannot be repaired, that can only leave pain, and mistakes that cannot be repaired, that damage that lasts forever. Don't let temporary emotions cloud your mind. Don't let weakness drag you down paths that you will regret for the rest of your life. Respect boundaries, protect love and trust in the family, because once they are broken, there is no way to go back. Sometimes we only have one chance to preserve what is most important, and if we lose it, it will be the most painful thing you have to face. Thank you, everyone, for listening to my story. If you find this story meaningful, please support me by liking and subscribing to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. Thank you, and see you again. My kind father. Just a whisper, hoping Mom wouldn't notice. My shaky, soft voice was like a slight breeze through a doorway gap. My throat felt tight, making it hard to speak, like I was holding back a huge, painful secret. My heart raced like it might explode. I gripped my blanket tightly without realizing it. My breathing became uneven and jerky. Every little noise in the quiet room made me jump, scared my secret would come out. Hi, everyone. I'm Copy. I'm going to share my story. A story I thought I'd keep hidden forever. The saddest part is, I'm the one who caused the problem. It's a story so unbelievable, it feels like it belongs in a film, but it really happened to me. No matter how much I want to forget, it's stuck in my head, bothering me every single day. I don't think I'll ever be able to fix my errors or make things right with the person I hurt so badly. I damaged not just their feelings, but also their trust in me, and I can't undo it. I'm a pretty girl living with my mom and dad in the small, quiet town of Carmel. By the sea, California. My dad, Gage, owns a popular seafood restaurant. He's fit and goes to the gym a lot. So even though he's almost 50, he looks much younger. He's tough and confident, but always kind and caring. My mom, Yaisa, teaches literature at the high school, close to our home. She's kind and soft, and really likes classic books. Each evening, she usually sits by the window, reading under a cozy light. She always remembers to give me advice and lots of love. My mother showed me how to live honestly and with feeling. From when I was a kid until now, I've always felt the love of both my parents, who put all their energy into taking care of me and keeping me safe. When I was small, whenever my dad got home from work, I'd race to him and jump into his arms. My little arms would go tight around his neck in a big hug. Dad always felt like the safest, most secure spot to be. It felt like if I was in his arms, everything would be okay. I didn't overthink it. I just felt safe and loved. I was also a carefree girl who liked pretty things. I'd often pick out the prettiest, fanciest dresses I owned. Then I'd run to my parents, twirl around and wait for them to say something nice. Because they loved me. They always smiled and said kind things, their eyes full of pride. Even though these compliments were small, they made me feel like the happiest girl ever. After dinner, when we all sat together watching TV, I always sat on my dad's lap. He'd hold me, and his hugs were gentle and warm. I grew up with so much affection that it became a hard habit to break. Even as an adult, I still like to sit on my dad's lap. When I was young, I loved sitting in my dad's lap, feeling safe and cherished like a small child. This comforting habit felt like a special connection, a simple pleasure I never wanted to lose. Lately, though, something feels different when I hug him or sit with him. His reaction has changed. It's no longer the easy, natural embrace I was used to. Sometimes he hesitates, and other times his hug feels too tight. The way he looks at me has also shifted. The usual love and kindness are still there, but now there's a puzzled look in his eyes, almost like he's keeping a secret. This makes my heart race because I sense something isn't right, even though I don't want to admit it. I tell myself I'm probably overthinking things, that it's just a temporary change. But the uneasy feeling lingers, reminding me that things aren't as uncomplicated as they used to be. My dad has always stayed fit, and even in his older years, he's still strong and looks great, just like he did when he was younger. He's not just my father. He's a symbol of power and attractiveness that I've always looked up to. He's still a very good-looking man with broad shoulders and a well-built physique. Whenever I see him, I still feel a strong affection for him. A strange emotion I can't quite explain. Maybe it's his self-assuredness or his powerful presence that still brings back memories of my childhood. When I was little, my dad was everything to me, but recently, things felt a little strange. It wasn't just the normal love a girl has for her dad. It was a fuzzy, hard-to-explain feeling. I noticed I was staring at him more, and when I was close to him, I felt something odd inside. One afternoon, I got home from school, and Dad was already there, like always. He got home before Mom and would usually be on the couch, watching TV. He was always glued to the screen. When I came in, he was sitting there, looking relaxed and like his normal self. Even though I was older now, I ran to him without thinking. Like it was the most natural thing in the world, I hopped onto his lap, just like I did as a little kid. He hugged me, like always. But this time it felt weird. His hug was still comforting, but the feeling between us was off, and it made me uncomfortable. I tried to ignore it, thinking I was making it up, but the strange feeling stuck around. Realized that something was touching me as I sat on Dad's lap at first. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that it was just the uncomfortable position I was sitting in, or maybe it was something in his pocket. But the longer I sat, the more it became clear, like a presence that couldn't be ignored. My heart started to beat faster, and suddenly the atmosphere felt strange, heavy, and stuffy. I felt awkward, not knowing what to do. The closeness that had always made me feel safe made me feel uneasy and uncomfortable. I sat still, trying to keep myself calm, but unanswered questions arose in my heart. Dad's eyes were shy and silent like mine. We both said nothing, just sat in the stuffy atmosphere until Mom suddenly walked in, breaking the atmosphere. I wanted to stand up, but it felt like my legs were tied down, unable to anything. Just silently looked at me. And in his eyes I no longer recognized the familiar warmth of the old days. Then suddenly the sound of the door opening rang out. My mother walked in, breaking the stuffy atmosphere. We both quickly looked away from each other, and I quickly stood up, trying to act as normal as possible. But the strange feeling was still there, weighing heavily on my heart, like something that could never return to the way it was before. Even though everything looked normal inside, I clearly felt the change. My dad seemed to start caring more about me. He often asked about me paying attention to the little things in my life that he had never noticed before. He started buying me new clothes and things, the things that I didn't ask for. Those gifts confused me at first, but gradually I realized that this care was not like fatherly love anymore. Every time it happened, I couldn't deny the strange feeling. It was like we were becoming a couple rather than father and son. The distance between me and my father was not just physical. His gaze became distant, and the moments of silence were longer than ever. I felt something change in the atmosphere between us, but I didn't know how to face it. Then one day, the day when the boundary between me and my father was truly broken. It was a moment I will never forget. That day, my mother had to go on a business trip due to the school's proposal, leaving only me and my father at home. I had just come home from school, entered the house, and before my eyes was a completely unexpected scene on the dining table. My father had prepared a sumptuous dinner. The atmosphere in the house suddenly became different, almost a bit romantic. The candlelight flickered, the food smelled delicious, and especially 2 bottles of red wine were already placed on the table. I couldn't hide my surprise. My eyes widened as I looked at my father and laughed. "Why are you so thoughtful today?" I still thought it was just a coincidence, a happy surprise, without the slightest suspicion of anything deeper. My father, with his usual smile, replied that he had something good to say at the restaurant, something successful that he wanted to celebrate. I was also happy, didn't ask any more questions, just wanted to enjoy this dinner with my father. We sat at the table eating and drinking together there. Wine flowed evenly in the glasses. The soft candlelight made the scene warmer and more intimate than ever. I didn't feel anything wrong at that time. Everything seemed too normal, too familiar. But from within, this closeness gradually took on a different meaning, a feeling that I couldn't put into words. We ate and confided, recalling stories from when I was a child. When I was the little girl who always clung to my father. Sweet memories, little jokes, all of them made us both laugh, as if all the tension from before had melted away. Laughter echoed in the warm room, and the atmosphere between us seemed closer than ever after 2 bottles of wine were finished. I felt myself starting to get drunk. My mind was, as the alcohol seemed to blur all reason. We sat closer to each other, and I don't know if it was the alcohol or something else, but suddenly A question popped out of my mouth that I never thought I would ask. "Do you like me?" I asked, my voice soft, but no longer like a child asking a father. That question was not the innocent question of a child, but carried a deeper meaning, as if I was asking from a completely different perspective, a perspective that my sober mind would never allow me to say. My father was silent for a moment. Then he turned to look at me, his eyes deep as thoughtful, as if he was examining something, his eyes deep as thoughtful, as if he was examining something inside me. And then he answered, his voice warm. Yes. Just one word, but it was heavy and full of hidden meaning. We both looked at each other in that moment. The space seemed to freeze between us was no longer the closeness of father and son, but a different connection, beyond all the limits I had ever known. I don't know what drove me at that moment. Maybe it was the alcohol. Maybe it was the emotions that had been suppressed for so long without a word. I gently reached out and hugged my father's neck. A strange feeling invaded my whole body. But I didn't stop, didn't think anymore. I only knew that at that moment, I couldn't control myself. My father paused for a moment, but then he returned my hug. His arms wrapped around my waist, hugging me tighter. The distance between us was no longer there. We looked at each other, our eyes meeting for a long moment, as if no more words were needed. We both seemed to understand each other's hidden thoughts. Without words, we kissed each other, slowly and cautiously at first, as if we were rediscovering a familiar tenderness. But after a few seconds, the hesitation disappeared, giving way to an intense, overwhelming feeling. Our hugs became tighter and tighter, not just to get closer, but as if we wanted to hold on to this moment forever. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I felt the warmth of my father's body, making everything around me disappear. My father began to gently touch my back. His hand seemed to explore every line, every breath. The initial tenderness gradually gave way to longing caresses. As if my father could not control the rising desire, his fingers slid over every part of my body, cautious yet greedy, as if he wanted to explore everything without missing anything. Every touch, every gesture made me shiver, as if my skin knew how to respond to his every movement. My father picked me up gently but firmly, his strong arms holding me tightly, as if he didn't want to let go. I wrapped my arms around his neck, feeling each of our rapid breaths. He walked without hesitation, leading me into the room where there was no light except for the dim light from outside. At this moment, we no longer cared about anything else. Not time, not space, but only each other, as if the world had stopped at this moment. All thoughts disappeared, leaving only a feeling of intense longing, a deep connection that could not be expressed in words. My father placed me on the bed, and our lips found each other again, merging